This is just one chapter of the Stories with Sapphire podcast. Hear this story and others like it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Hello, believers, non believers, and everyone in between. You're listening to Stories with Sapphire. I am Sapphire Sandalo. Now get cozy and open your mind because it's story time. The Cursed Ruins, submitted by Maryam. When I was little, my family would travel during the summer to visit my cousins in Greece. Our whole family still lives there, save my parents and grandparents, who moved to the States a while ago. We usually stay in my dad's parents' village, a small and isolated town deep in the northern mountains. It's a beautiful place, but super outdated, like majorly. The roads are unmarked and unpaved, and you'll be driving near the edge of cliffs with 100-foot drops at any given time. I was always uneasy driving down that road. One year when I was 15, we arrived at my cousin's house in the village. My parents got us out of school in June, a couple of days before summer release, so we could make it in time for my cousin Asmina's birthday. Asmina and I were best friends. We loved adventuring around the village, playing with the stray cats that roamed the streets, and looking for turtles that we'd find in the field. "I have something amazing to tell you," Asmina said excitedly once we'd settled in, "but you have to promise not to tell anyone." Hesitantly, I nodded. Asmina looked around carefully before leaning in close and said, "There's an ancient temple that an archaeologist team from Germany discovered this past winter. It's only 10 minutes away from here, and all the workers are gone for the summer. I've been waiting for you so we can go check it out together." An ancient temple did sound fun, and they weren't unusual. 1,000-year-old ruins or artifacts were unearthed all the time there. My dad used to tell us, in any country as old as Greece, you're bound to run into the past at some point or another. "Isn't it all fenced off?" I asked, knowing how most dig sites were usually closed to the public. Asmina waved a hand dismissively at that. "Please, those chain links are so flimsy. The temple is right below a cave entrance. We can just climb over the rocks and we're in." I frowned, knowing that if we were caught, we'd both be in huge trouble. Most of the ancient sites we'd explored before were open, and if they weren't, they were at least known to be visited under the table anyways. This sounded different, though. It sounded more important somehow. "I don't know," I said uneasily. "What if our parents found out? I'll be grounded forever." Asmina rolled her eyes, tugging at one of my braids playfully. "You're so timid, Maria. Honestly, no one will see. You know our parents. They chat over dinner for hours. They won't even notice us leave. And besides, we won't be gone for more than an hour." "Please?" I sighed, knowing that I might regret not taking this opportunity when fall rolled around and I'd be back in boring middle school. Still, a nagging feeling stayed in the back of my mind, almost like a sense of dread. The evening quickly approached, and when the sun was setting and our parents were at the patio dinner table talking, Asmina spoke up. "Mom, Maria and I are going to go look for our favorite cat now. You know, the brown one with the kittens. This is the only time she comes out." My auntie smiled at us, my own parents nodding in approval. "Just be safe, girls, and take your cell phones with you. Be back here by 9 p.m., understand?" We both agreed before dashing off into the mountains, me trying to keep up with Asmina, like always. She never failed to wait for me, though, and soon we were giggling like old times. My cousin was right. The temple was only a short walk away, but it somehow seemed much further than that. The path she took was barely recognizable in the thick brush, leading deeper and deeper into the mountain forest. Tall trees cast shadows in the setting sunlight, and the world seemed to have an ethereal glow about it. We finally came to a clearing of sorts where the trees became more sparse and a mountainside jutted out of the ground, large stones and boulders bordering the rocky terrain. Then I saw it, the chain link fence, and behind that, the temple. It looked like most others I'd seen before. Tall columns left skeletal shells of their former glory, the walls having been worn away and crumbled over millennia to only bits and pieces that formed the outline of a structure. There was what looked to be a raised slab of rock in the middle of the columns, no doubt where the altar probably once stood. But what caught my eye immediately, and what made me shiver where I stood, was the statue. A woman's figure was sculpted on top of the altar. Only the torso and part of the arms remained. She was wearing a sash across one of her shoulders, but unlike the other maiden statues I'd seen, this sash was a sash of chains. Carved from stone with perfect detail, you could still see the manacles and the individual links crossing the woman's sleek torso and wrapping around her. It looked and felt wrong. Maybe it's a slave's quarters, I thought to myself, knowing that many temples used to have small rooms built in where the slaves who cleaned up and kept after the building would live. But I'd never seen an entire statue dedicated to one before. They say it was built to honor Hephaestus, the god of fire, Asmina murmured, staring at the statue. The temple used to be completely closed off to the public. Only the most holy priestesses and warriors would be allowed to enter. I wrung my hands together, unable to keep from noticing the sun getting lower and lower on the horizon. Maybe we should go, I said quietly. It's getting dark. Asmina didn't even hear me, though, as she was already climbing the large rocks that bordered the mouth of the cave, lifting herself over before jumping to the ground on the other side. She raised an eyebrow at me, smirking. Come on, cousin, we haven't even seen anything yet. I sighed, climbing the rough edge of the cave myself before joining her. The grass inside was tall and overgrown, weeds littering the site where parts of the temple's floor had been exposed from the archaeologists' digging. I know it sounds stupid, but the moment I set foot in the temple, I felt like I set foot in some stranger's house, apprehensive and nervous, like someone might come in and find me, like someone was still living there. The boys in school say that this temple was destroyed on purpose after a ritual that went wrong, Asmina continued as we roamed around the ruins. Since Hephaestus was the god of fire, there was a flame in every one of his altars that always had to keep burning. Day and night, they'd have someone stoking the fire and fueling the flame. If it ever went out, it was a bad omen and a sign that the gods were angry. There's evidence scientists have uncovered of human sacrifices they used to perform in these desperate times. A woman would be chosen from the village. She had to be the most beautiful, the smartest, and the kindest, almost perfect in every way. Anything less was considered an insult to Hephaestus. Once they chose the woman, they would put her in the temple and burn her alive. The flames from her ashes would be used to set the new fire. Definitely disturbed, I swallowed thickly and glared at her. You're just trying to scare me. That's not true. I'm not kidding, Asmina said seriously. The priestesses thought that if they gave Hephaestus a new bride, he would return his favor to the village, and all the bad luck would go away. But it's said that in this temple, that ritual went horribly wrong. One day, the flame in the altar went out. Soon after that, a terrible famine struck the village, and everyone was desperate to survive. In order to start the fire again, the holy men of the temple started their search for a woman. When they found someone they thought would do, it's said that she fled the scene, terrified, and wound up running to a villager's house to hide. When she knocked on the door, a man and his wife opened it. The husband wanted nothing to do with this, but his wife felt sorry for the girl and let her hide in their home. Well, when the priests finally tracked the girl down to the house she'd fled to, they demanded that she be returned to them. The wife was about to escort the girl out another way so she could flee into the wilderness. But the girl betrayed her and shoved the wife into the street in her place. "There she is," the villagers exclaimed, mistaking the wife for the girl. The woman tried to explain herself. Her husband ran to try and stop it, but it was too late. They took the woman into the altar and sacrificed her to the gods. It's said that because she died in such anguish, betrayed and furious, her spirit was rejected by Hephaestus, and she roams the earth now, burning any man alive who enters the temple alone with a woman, making sure that what happened to her would never happen to any woman again. I shivered, staring at the statue that seemed to haunt me now. Was that how the woman looked before her violent death? Chained and alone? I was never into the supernatural or believing in spirits, but after what happened next, I have never doubted them. A couple of years later, I was sitting at home doing my schoolwork when I got a text from Asmina. It was a link to a local village news article, and I tapped it open in curiosity. There, the headline read, "Suspect in woman's assault found dead in historical ruins." The story went on to report a man who was on the run with his ex-girlfriend, who he had kidnapped from her home and taken hostage. He parked his car at the edge of the forest and ran to hide from the police, taking the woman with him as leverage. However, when the police finally tracked them down hours later, they found the woman hysterical and in shock, and the man's burnt corpse on the ground. At first, the officers considered charging the ex-girlfriend, but once common sense set in, they realized there was no way this woman could have built any fire large enough, let alone restrained a man so much larger than her to kill him in such a manner. The woman never gave a statement on what she saw, as her mental state was deemed too erratic by doctors. She was taken to the nearby hospital, where she remains to this day. I jolted in my seat in fright when my phone buzzed. Asmina texting me again. "We were so lucky," her message read. "You have no idea." I forced my shaking fingers to type back, replying, "What do you mean?" Asmina replied after a long pause. "That night, I almost invited my boyfriend to come with us to the temple. He would have been burned alive." Full disclosure, Maryam wrote this story inspired by an urban legend that her cousins told her. But nevertheless, I love a good cautionary lore. The stories and myths shared about this place are what protects women in that area. If you are a man entering this hidden, secluded place with malicious intent, and you've heard what happened to other men, you would think twice before doing so. That is the power of stories. Thanks for joining me today. If you have a story you'd like to hear on the show, send it to storieswithsapphire@gmail.com. And did you know that I offer tarot readings? You can schedule a session at storieswithsapphire.com. Salamat and good night.